Good evening, Sugar Grove. Thank you for taking the time out tonight to join us for our virtual town hall. Whether you're watching live or you're catching up later, I'm glad you're here. I'm Village President Jennifer Conan. Tonight, I'm here to share updates on some of the exciting projects and initiatives happening in our village. We've also asked for your questions, and we'll do our best to answer those questions at the end of the presentation. You also might be able to get an opportunity to have some of those questions answered. So if you did submit a question, you will find that we might be able to answer it through the presentation. I'm also joined tonight by two key staff members, our Finance Director, Matt Anastasia, and our Village Administrator, Scott Keppel. This is your village, and we're excited to share how we're working together to build a better future for everyone. As your village president, I know how important it is for the community to understand the philosophy behind the decisions we make. That's why I want to take a moment to lay out the 5 guiding principles that shape my approach to economic development. These principles are my compass. They're about creating a sugar grove that works for everyone, where families can thrive, businesses can grow, and we can maintain the character of our town. I want you to know that every decision is made with these goals in mind: enhancing quality of life for our residents, strengthening our economic stability, keeping development balanced with our community's character, ensuring sustainable infrastructure and services, and diversifying the tax base to ease the burden on you, the homeowner. We have some exciting business opportunities that are coming to the community. Two to mention specifically is Bright Path Daycare, childcare facility that is in the old Chesterbrook Academy building on Park and Capitol. You've probably noticed some of the progress there with the landscape improvements, this new signage going in. They're accepting enrollment now, and we are expecting them to open in the first quarter of 2025. And then Cilantro Taco Grill will be opening in January. I know that many residents have been awaiting that project. So they do have an outdoor patio, and we expect them to open in January. Also within that strip center, the strip center where Cilantro is located, there are some other vacancies. There is a lease agreement on 2 of those suites to be joined to one. And a new business opportunity will be coming shortly. We can't announce that yet, but there is something coming. So I just wanted to give those 2 highlights and the addition on the 2 suites. And then one other note would be across the way on Division. There is a building there with a vacancy in the center, and there is an IT business that is coming to locate in there in 2025 as well. So those are some new highlights. Projects under review. First, the Lennar development that has worked its way through the Plan Commission with a concept plan and made its way to the village board with a concept plan. They have formally submitted to the village, and we expect them to work through the process, starting with the Plan Commission in the early part of 2025. That project is located on Galena Boulevard, so on the off-ramp of 56 to Galena Boulevard, next to the Windsor Point subdivision. Their plan is for 332 units, both townhome and single family, 2 programmed parks, trail system that will connect to the bridge that is underway, that will connect to the Gilman Trail. So the nice walkable and creating that connectivity with our bike paths. The Starbucks, located at 421 North Sugar Grove Parkway near the Jewel, that is the outlet that's next to the AutoZone. We did approve that several months back. We expect that they're going to be breaking ground in January with an opening date probably late summer. Jiffy Lube, situated on Galena Boulevard, another outlet of the Jewel Shopping Center in front of the Ace Hardware. The Jiffy Lube came in front of the Plan Commission and then ultimately the Village Board at our last meeting. The Village Board had some requests for some architectural deviations from what was submitted. We expect them to be back at our next meeting on December 17th with those changes. So hoping they did heed the advice of the Village Board and made changes to their building. So we hope that gets approved at the next meeting. Settlers Ridge, off of Gordon and Galena Boulevard. Was a development that was started in early 2005, and 95 homes were recently approved. That is a developer by MHM GU LLC. It includes those 95 units, but also that developer is working now to finish the rest of the subdivision through a master planned effort, and they are working in collaboration with the village and the homeowners association. So that's a nice working partnership there. Some new village initiatives. We are really working hard here at the village and with the village board to strengthen public safety. Modernizing our police department has been a project that's been underway for a few years now. We have gone through the space needs analysis with our staff. That was brought forward to the village board. We are working with another architect, and they are working currently on a plan for that entire building, and we expect that will be back in front of the village board, and that will be presented in collaboration with our police chief and the architect at January 7th meeting. So that is an effort. We did vacate that building, so for some of you that are unaware, the admin and finance departments were located in half of that building, and the smaller half of the building was actually the police department, and they have long needed the space. So the building has been completely turned over to the police department, but it isn't suitable by today's standards for an effective police department. So the village is working to modernize that building for them. And then also, in an effort to save the village money, which is a big focus of the village at all times, not only our staff, but our village board, we did implement solar fields for our water treatment facility. So it is anticipated that we will save roughly $1 million over the course of 20 years on our utility bills for that water treatment facility. So this is where we really have focused on collaborative, community-focused TIF management. When I came into office, we did have a few existing TIF districts in place. One in particular, this number is really effective of the 2 TIF districts. So over the last several years, the village board has approved $1.5 million in surplus to be returned to all taxing bodies. And really what that is born from is the TIF district is collecting property tax increased revenue, and there was not a redevelopment agreement in place that needed to be reimbursed, and we did not have an existing project underway. So as that money was building in the TIF district, the village board wanted to surplus that back to the other taxing bodies so that so that money is flowing to them that is above and beyond their property tax cap. With that being said, one of the things that we looked at in TIF 1 specifically was the use of sanitary sewer and the ability to provide sanitary sewer to the businesses out toward the airport. And when that study came back that really wasn't a viable option for us, the cost was just going to be way too great, the focus really turned from keeping that TIF district open. And this year we did end, about a month or so, 2 months ago, the village board decided to end TIF number 1 and freeing those funds and improving that EAV for all taxing bodies. So in the year in 2026, the EAV will be increased for everybody's levy moving forward. Next year, we will still collect within the TIF fund their property taxes payable next year for 2024, and then we will surplus those dollars out as well. So that will be above and beyond their property tax levy. Another way that we focus on collaboration is when we do have a TIF district and there is a capital need by one of our taxing body partners, we want to understand what their need is and help them if we can. So one of the things that came forward from the Sugar Grove Fire Protection District was the need for a new ambulance. We have a senior building located on Galena Boulevard that's located in TIF number 2, and there has been many calls of service to that building. And so the need is warranted to help the Fire Protection District pay for a new ambulance. So the village board has supported and will be supporting a $217,000 contribution out of the TIF district toward that new ambulance. Lessening the tax burden on the homeowner. This is essential for everyone with rising costs. I want everybody to understand what our tax base looks like in Sugar Grove. We are roughly 88% residential development here in town. I guess a more comparable community that has a more balanced tax base is somewhere around 75%. So we're a little bit out of balance. And to that end, you're probably feeling it through the property taxes that you're paying. Our goal really is to bring in more business to Sugar Grove and lessen the burden on you. How do we do that? Obviously through those new businesses. And what do those new businesses need? They need customers. That's how we bring them here, right? So it's a contribution between new homeowners, new residential growth, but also that daytime population that they need to open their business. So we want to make sure that they're not just sharing the same customers or we won't get new business growth, that we are creating new opportunities for those businesses here so that they do thrive. Financial relief for residents. This goes back to the greater mission of, doing what we need to do and providing better services at less cost to the resident. How have we done that? Over the last 2 years, and it hasn't done in our history before, the Village Board has approved a 0% property tax levy increase. What does that look like for you? I know I've heard other taxing bodies talk about EAV goes up and the tax rate goes down. We're not asking for any more money from the existing residents. We are asking to capture new growth. So when we do have new growth, new home construction, or a new commercial building goes up, we are actually asking to capture them, but we're not asking for any more revenue out of the existing homeowners. The other way that we've been able to save money for our residents, in the last 5 years, probably started really with COVID when we weren't really sure what was going to happen. We kept that year flat as far as a water rate. It was a 0 increase. And then we did several decreases. So now over the last 5 years, we've been able to save the residents 5% on their water bills. So we are asking for less out of your utilities. The big news this year was the introduction of the Grove. It really has been this year because of the process of going through the process, but it really has been on the village's, certainly our staff, for roughly the last 2.5 years working with the developer on this project. It is a mixed-use development designed to provide housing, recreational spaces, and economic opportunities for our tax base. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the slide here. The Grove in the Crown Community Development Project, really what it encompasses within this project are a balanced plan. When they came forward in 2019, it was truly out of balance. It was all of one thing. Their proposal was all industrial on a community that hadn't really found its footing yet. So we were too young, in my opinion, in the amount of development that we had here to accept a development that was really all of one thing. This development is a mixed-use development. It encompasses residential, recreational spaces for all our residents, not just the new residents that might purchase a home in this area, community-enhanced spaces, community parks, community pickleball, a community stage for concerts, boutique kind of shops. So the idea of a coffee shop or a bakery or a small restaurant, walkable in that town center that you can patronize retail and restaurant all in one place just by parking your car and walking around that area. Those are the things that are coming. Also on the north side of this development, there is industrial space and corridor commercial space also planned in this development. While yes, they did have 8 million square feet of industrial space planned in 2019. This is truly a compromise on development as it is essential to the village, its property tax base, and all our surrounding all of our surrounding taxing bodies also rely on property taxes. So it was essential to develop this area, and this is a diversified plan. I'm sorry, I want to have you go back for one moment. I'm sorry. So diving in a little bit deeper in what those zones mean, Area 1 in the orange, closest to the neighborhood of Hannaford Farm, is single-family detached residential. That is planned. That is the only thing allowed in that zone. Area 2 is a multitude of some housing. So you will have single-family townhomes in that area. You will likely see single-family detached residential in that area. I know there has been talk through the developer of doing an age-targeted type product like a Del Webb. It might not be a Pulte Del Webb, but there is definitely a talk and long talks about that. The town center area, as I mentioned, with the commercial and single-family townhomes on another side. So there is opportunity to reside right there at the town center. I did mention the industrial space to you and the commercial and multifamily potentially on the north side as well. So diving in a little bit into what the gathering spaces look like, there are programmed activities. So I know when it's on the slide and you're like, well, what does that mean exactly? The developer is committing to 5 to 7 years, depending how this all plays out, but minimally 5 years, creating a programmed calendar of events that will happen in this space that draws the community in, and you can look in that calendar and say, do I want to attend potentially a concert on a Friday night, or maybe there's an acoustical guitar or an artist playing, or an art show, or a scarecrow festival, or ice skating in the wintertime. Like I said, those concerts, we already do Groovin' in the Grove concerts, and they'll likely continue over at the library, but this is another alternate site. Or maybe the school district wants to use some of these property, use this stage area for any type of play potentially for the community, or their band wants to play. It can truly be used for everyone. The large play park, and these are the amenities that the developer has been committed to through the redevelopment agreement. So the items listed, the large play park, the splash pad, the interconnected trails, the preservation of the tree groves. I can't say it enough. I know I've heard a lot about Crown taking down trees. Crown is not taking down the trees that are specifically located on the southeast corner. In the original 2019 plan, they did put a warehouse on that site in their plan, and that was their intent. They heard in 2019 that the community did not want those trees taken out. They did not push forward with that in the 2024 plan. So they were approved. The tree grove area is being preserved. The retention area that is a wet bottom, intentionally trying to be a lake so that it can be programmed as well for kayaking and fishing. Those things are planned. Then the developer was also committed to the outdoor stage per the redevelopment agreement and the pickleball courts. So they are committed to building those things and obligated to building those things per the agreement with the village. This is just a deeper dive into the community spaces so you can look at them a little closer. Next to the detention basin, you'll see that's a townhome area projected to be built, as well as townhomes on the north side, and that is the future Denny Road extension, and it ties in with Scott Road, just as a reference point. So the boutique kind of shopping and commercial and restaurant that could be located around the town green, that is still there. There is a village hall or community building site with the property has been gifted to the village to have a community building of some sort up there. And then commercial on the north side of Denny could be a little bit larger scale in the sense that a grocer could potentially be warranted after new development does grow in this area. And what I mean by larger grocer would be something more similar to a Trader Joe's. It's probably the size of something like an Aldi, but it's kind of a boutique grocer. We expect that would be viable in that area. The farmers market, I know that the folks that ran the farmers market for a while in the police department parking lot took a break this past season. We're hoping to revitalize that in a softer space, in a green space like a town center space as an ideal location for them. The Grove Park, located on the north side. So that area does represent some properties there, or some uses that were approved through the village board. Data centers was one of those uses approved. Medical office, commercial buildings, distribution, multifamily not in zone 4 where the industrial would be, but restaurants, and specifically dark skies. I want to talk about that for just a moment. Trustee White, when we were working through this process, was concerned about light pollution. While your village does have a light ordinance today, and we do prevent light pollution, it was concerning that with the amount of development that would be happening, that there would be too much light pollution, and it's not what we're accustomed to. So he did work and spend time working on an ordinance that he submitted to the developer, and the developer looked it over and agreed that they also didn't want to have light pollution. Remember, they're developing homes in this area too, and they want those homeowners to be happy. So I'm happy to say that they did adopt that ordinance within their agreement. So there is a night sky ordinance with them. And we don't have one village-wide. So while it was agreed upon to do it on the Crown property, we certainly want to take that ordinance and apply it village-wide. So that is an effort that is moving forward with the village. You should see that in the next, I want to say, month or so, coming forward through Plan Commission and then working its way through the process through the village board. So if you're interested in that, please stay tuned for one of those meetings. Some housing options we have, this is from their slide specifically, some residential options that they plan that are opportunities here. Single family detached. The ranch home, there's not enough ranch homes in Sugar Grove. Certainly folks are downsizing and they do want to live in a ranch. Whether you are young or you're aging out of your larger home, those opportunities would be there for you. And then the townhome living. There's certainly people that have children that have gone through the system here in Sugar Grove and graduated Canelan High School, maybe got their job and don't necessarily have a spot to reside in the town that they grew up and loved. So these are opportunities for those children to come back and establish themselves here in Sugar Grove. Balanced development. This was really kind of key. This was a planned development district, and some of the highlights include that light pollution that I mentioned earlier in protecting the community and its surrounding areas from that light pollution. Gas stations. I want to touch upon gas stations for a moment. They are allowed on the Crown property at the interchange, but we did hear a lot about it being a truck stop, and we tried to acknowledge the fact that we don't want that either, nor did the development. And I will tell you what truck stop meant to me. Some of those larger gas stations that you see off of interchanges, they typically don't look clean, kept, a lot of overnight parking. You can't have that here in Sugar Grove. You can't have overnight parking. You can't have a gas station with mechanics bays that will eliminate certain users. You can't have lounges. You can't have showers. There's also considerations that were made that said that you had to have minimally 2 pumps per island. Now, they are allowed up to 24 pumps between diesel and gas pumps, but when you put 2 pumps per island, it reduces the overall footprint. The other thing that was considered was that Trustee Bonnie, as a police officer, did not want to see any pumps in the rear of any of these gas stations if there's more than one. And diesel has to be located in the front. And that's really from a crime perspective. He didn't want anything happening on the backside of a building, wanted everything to be open with the light in the front. So it is a smaller footprint, but it's certainly not by the definition of a truck stop. It would be more in keeping with a Casey's or a Gas and Go, and you're seeing several of those in the surrounding communities. Data centers have been a priority for economic benefits, and there are several economic benefits. One of the things that we heard as a village board over and over was the concern over truck traffic and pollution. We really wanted the developer to work toward the end of a data center because from that perspective, we didn't have truck traffic. There was lots of concerns from our Elburn neighbors worried about their children driving down these roads, making their way to the Canelan Harder Middle School, and intertwining with all the traffic that would be in and around the interchange. The data center developer, and I did announce back in September that the developer was under a letter of intent on all of the industrial space on the north side with a data center developer to build a data center campus. So they're smaller buildings, more reminiscent of what an office building would look like. And at this time, many years ago, we did have this area designated as Office Park. So it would be more similar to that. They are on private, gated, secure property. So from a police standpoint, there's lots of cameras. They are secure. It's easier for our police department to enforce. As far as fire concerns, they have massive fire suppression systems within their buildings. But they do pay a lot of property tax. And from all that we're reading in the out there about our school district, and they went to referendum last year and going again this year, our school does need money, and our other taxing bodies need money. This is one of those ways to improve our tax base with an industrial development that does pay large property taxes toward the village and everyone else with little impact to the residents, in the sense that you're not feeling them. They're there, they're seen, but not necessarily heard. That was the greatest thing we could possibly see. I also want to specify some of what is happening. People are talking about water usage and water consumption. The village has done its due diligence on what a building, particularly a data center, uses in water consumption. And we looked at the Cyrus One specifically building in Aurora. Their building would utilize roughly less than 5% of our total annual water that we pump on an annual basis. So their water usage is low. But to go a step farther, we felt like we needed to mandate what they could do. And we did that in two ways. We did it through the Fox Metro water system and what we could handle through capacity through water treatment. So they are held to 9 PE per acre. And also on the water usage side, they are held to the same PE per acre. So they're only able to use so much water from the village today. That's not going to change. That's in the approved documents with Crown Community Development. Additionally, what was I just going to tell you about that? I'm sorry. I'll come back to it because there's one other thought on that I had. But the annexation agreement key points that I want to touch upon are: the annexation agreement is in place for 20 years. At least 30% of this development is green space and open space. And the developer is to provide impact fees to support our schools, our parks, and our infrastructure. And also, a new water tower is planned to enhance community services. And that was also obligated through the redevelopment agreement. I'm going to ask Matt Anastasia to join us for all of our TIF. This is our finance director, and he worked extremely hard on making sure that the village is protected through this process. So I want to just dive in with here. So thank you.
Yep.
I know no one likes to do a live interview, but here we go. So the financial considerations of the TIF, what can the residents expect? Can you take us through basically the first three key points here of the frozen taxes, the increment, and the revenue distribution?
Sure. When a TIF is created, so for this example, we approved the TIF in 2024. The tax year EAV and base is going to be frozen for that year for the existing taxing districts. When that happens, anything above and beyond that going forward for development purposes that increases the EAV and property taxes that are paid are then distributed to the village in our TIF fund. The taxes that were originally paid under the base EAV will still continue to go to those taxing districts. Roughly, I believe right now they were around $51,000 for the entire property because it is a zone ag. So that will continue to go, and that will also still increase based on the ask for the taxing districts, whether that's PTEL or the CPI increases. That will continue to increase.
Okay.
The above and beyond will then come to the village into our TIF allocation fund, and that's where those revenues are distributed.
So just for clarity purposes, you know, a lot of taxing bodies ask for the max year over year in their property tax levy. I know CPI this year is 3.4. Most are tax capped at 5%. You're saying that the ag land value does increase.
Correct.
At that 5%, potentially max. But it does take slow incremental increases, even though it's been frozen.
Yes.
Okay. And then so the TIF, the way it's structured, let's talk about first state statute, but how did we and what did we obligate ourselves to and agree to specifically on how the disbursements happen?
Sure. A part of the redevelopment agreement that the village board approved after the TIF was approved spelled out the order in which the TIF funds are distributed and paid. So the first is school tuition reimbursement is part of the state statute. That is required by the village for any new student that goes into and lives within the boundaries of the TIF. That tuition dollar amount is reported by the school district back to the state of Illinois on an annual basis. And what the school district will then do is true up with the village, stating how many students have resided within the TIF boundaries. The tuition then is multiplied by those students, and that is paid back to the school district. There is a cap on that at 25% of the increment generated from those residential homes. So it is not on the total TIF, it is on the residential portion of the homes. And that is at 25% of the increment.
Okay.
And that would be the number one payment once TIF funds are received through increment.
Okay, and that gets shored up with us as a village before the JRB meeting in November, after property taxes have been paid, after the
Correct.
September payments have been made.
Yeah, once the revenues are received and we know how much we received, then they would true up and tell us how many students are there, and then we would determine the amount that is going to be distributed back for tuition payments.
Wonderful. Okay. Next, in the order of how disbursements would happen.
So then next would be the village had agreed and actually changed in the initial agreement from a 90-10 split to an 80-20 split with that developer. Of the 20%, immediately 10% will be distributed in surplus back to the taxing districts, similar to what we were doing in our other two TIFs. That is the first thing that will happen. The second 10% does go to the village for our TIF fund for any future TIF eligible expenses.
And just for clarity purposes, when we talk about the other TIF districts where the village board did surplus money, it was on an annual review basis. What this is an absolute guaranteed obligation to surplus that 10% off the top.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, and then those 10% that are going into the village's fund are eligible for any TIF eligible expense in the future. It is also eligible for, like you had mentioned, that annual review if there was a need for an additional surpluses. Those are village controlled funds.
Okay.
What else is in there is before the 80% is actually the developer and the village have agreed to discuss and review any capital expenditures that are caused by the TIF itself to any taxing district. So whether that's the school, the fire, or anybody that has a capital expenditure, the developer and the village have both agreed to review those above and beyond prior to the developer's 80% reimbursement.
I think that's an important note for everyone, is that while we do have a redevelopment agreement with the developer is very cognizant of the fact that this doesn't go but for the TIF district and wants to make sure that they can try to make the other taxing bodies whole through capital expenditures if they're warranted and needed. So they put that above the developer reimbursement.
So then the final is the 80% of the remaining funds will go to the eligible development expenses from the developer. And in the redevelopment agreement, it discusses how that happens. And mainly if there is increment, that will go directly to the developer for those expenses. Those expenses are able to be provided to the village for certification twice a year, but actual disbursement will happen once a year. So if there is no increment eligible, the village has agreed that we will issue a TIF note to that developer. And the difference between a TIF note and a TIF bond, a TIF note is owed to a developer directly. A TIF bond is not bought by an investor, meaning there's no repayment schedule with guaranteed annual payments. It's based on the increment that is generated and the money available. At the end of the TIF or the end of the note, if there is any outstanding balances on the notes, there is no obligation by the village to pay those. So it is really based on the performance of the TIF itself to pay back that developer. There also is no obligation if the developer were to go defunct or bankrupt. The village is not on the books to pay any of those developer notes out of any funds currently held with the village. It is all from increment generated from the TIF development.
Okay, and that brings me to one question that I'm sure a lot of you are kind of wondering in your minds right now is, when the developer comes forward with a note, which means they're asking the village to start that repayment on whether it be $20 million or more, whatever it may be, at what point, how do we decide that note is good? And at what trigger point, what are the processes to accept the infrastructure improvements? Because I think that's the key that residents need to understand, is that the developer can't just put pipes in the ground and then give us a note. So if you can just go into detail on that.
Yeah, so part of the redevelopment agreement did have some triggers as to when the village would issue a note to them, which would essentially start the interest that is attached to that note. The first and main point is that the village will not issue a note until there's 100 homes that have received certificates of occupancy south of 88. So that would generally be Area 1. So no note would be issued and no interest is accruing during that period for any dollars that are put into the infrastructure in the ground to make those areas developable.
Can I pause you 1 second? And just so we get back to, that neighborhood specifically, the TIF does not cover the infrastructure within the neighborhood. The TIF is paying for the spine infrastructure that the village would, in other circumstances, have in the ground already and make other fields viable for development. So the infrastructure that has to go into Area 1, the residential development near Hannaford Farm, that is the obligation of the home builder or developer for that, but that is not reimbursable.
That is correct.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And then, so once the 100 homes have been created and received certificates of occupancy, a note is eligible to be issued to the developer for the expenses that they have incurred that are part of the redevelopment agreement. I will say the redevelopment agreement also does not cover the total expense to the developer for this project. Their project costs are above and beyond the actual TIF reimbursement request. Once that happens, the remainder of all the notes will not be issued for any type of work or infrastructure put into the ground until it is substantially complete in accordance with the annexation agreement. The annexation agreement does have definition of what substantial completion is, and that is essentially being able to have the village and our village engineer accept those improvements and sign off on those. But most of the time, the infrastructure, water, and sanitary sewer do also need to be approved by the IEPA. That definition is in there of what substantial completion is. So we would not issue another note until any further infrastructure is approved under that definition of substantial completion.
So for all intents and purposes, it means usable.
Correct. It generally, when you look at that definition, it would say that it is an acceptable asset to now to the village. It's not just a pipe in the ground. It is an actual asset to the village.
Okay.
The biggest one also on the redevelopment agreement was the mass grading.
Yes.
And the mass grading over the entire property is a large dollar amount within there. What the developer had agreed to was splitting that mass grading cost based on each final plat of subdivision. So each area that they come into plat, whether the total mass grading for the property is 500 acres, if they came in for a plat with 50 acres, they would only receive 10% of the mass grading cost, even though they may have done all of the mass grading already.
Okay. So I guess the key takeaway here from the explanation that was just given by Matt is that the village has not obligated itself to any financial debt.
Correct.
Okay. And the key triggers that have been implemented in the redevelopment agreement have been put so to ensure that vertical development happens and property taxes are being paid, and that the developer is only getting reimbursed at substantial completion of utilities that are useful and viable for the village.
Right.
Okay. Which means parcels can develop because those are functioning
Yes.
utilities. Okay. And it, like, for an example as well, the utilities that we're referring to are water and sewer infrastructure. There is some IDOT improvement, roadway improvement as part of their redevelopment agreement. But it does not include things like utility, ComEd utilities within your personal plat that we all have on our property where we have those utility boxes. It wouldn't constitute something like that.
Right.
Okay. So additionally, within the redevelopment agreement, we talk about impact fees and land cash fees. And what we did through the permitting process in allocating funds, in some cases, some of the funds we would have collected for ourselves to the other taxing bodies. So can you just take us through what we did and what the village board approved for all the other taxing bodies?
Sure. On all of the residential, there is an exhibit within the annexation agreement that breaks down what a residential building permit would be, as well as commercial and industrial. The impact fees to school, fire, park, and library are what are depicted on the screen. The developer has estimated roughly 1,365 residential units, and that would be multiplied by each of these for the specific taxing district. So, for example, the school district at that dollar amount would be roughly $2.388 million in impact and land cash fees per residential permit. So that's in total how much they would receive just for the residential permits.
Okay.
In discussion also with the fire protection, because they, on a commercial industrial basis, would be really the taxing district that's affected the most on a commercial industrial building. So through discussions with the fire districts, we have implemented and included impact fees for commercial industrial for the fire district as well. at a 15 cents per square foot. So, for an example, a 250,000 square foot building would roughly be about 37,500 of impact fee paid to the fire district.
Okay, and that should be noted that that number did come from the fire protection districts and their fee structure and what they were looking for. And fire is impacted on all of the development, where the schools are not impacted on all the development, nor is the library or the park district. One of the things that I think is a highlight here that everyone should know as well, our park district here in Sugar Grove runs with the township boundaries, the Sugar Grove Township boundaries. That took the property to about the ComEd power lines on the south side. Because there isn't a competing park district on the other side of this property that touches their boundary, it affords the Sugar Grove Park District the opportunity to annex all of that Crown property into the park district, and they're working to that end today. So all of the industrial development and the commercial development that was outside of their boundary is now included inside of their boundary, or will be shortly, and they'll be receiving revenue in the future from that development. Specifically, a lot of what the board heard, both at public hearings, but also through emails and correspondence, is how are we affecting the school district? And what does this TIF do? And how much money can we anticipate that the school will receive through this process? So you can just dive us into this slide.
Sure. I know we just discussed a lot of financials between all the taxing districts and mainly the school district. So over the life of the TIF, based on the estimates and pro forma, I guess, of the development, the school districts are estimated to receive roughly $124 million. What that includes is roughly $95 million based on the 25% increment of the residential homes for tuition payments. Okay. And that is based on the state statute. So that number is roughly $95 million if everything were capped out on an annual basis. The other portions is the $2.38 million that we discussed regarding impact fees and land cash fees. Mm-hmm. And then the remaining is that 10% that we discussed that is coming off the top when we get those funds in the TIF account that are surplus back to the taxing districts. Now, the school district has roughly 70% of a tax bill. So we estimated, based on those pro forma and revenue projections, another about $26 million. That would be just that portion of the surplus. So that comes to the $124 million.
Okay, so for clarity purposes, I know one of the questions that was asked of you through the school district was, is the $37 million, even though it's in the pro forma, a conservative number, or is it a number that's a pie in the sky kind of number based on the development? And knowing that the developer has signed a letter of intent with a data center developer for all of the industrial space, they pay more in property taxes. So with that moving forward, and I can tell you that that is moving forward with Crown Community Development, and they're working toward an actual contract now, is the $37 million a conservative number?
Yes, under those assumptions, we did not include any type of data center within those assumptions. It was just a standard industrial building. So okay. Yes, based on having a letter of intent on a data center, paying more property taxes, those numbers are short of including a data center in the pro forma. Okay. And so conservatively speaking, again, because you could have housing development that is age targeted and not producing any children, the $28 million with the conservative estimate between all the housing being built out at that 1,365 number that you said, that's $2.3 million in impact fees, and then the conservative estimate going to the school district is another $26 million and change. You're at $28 million over the course of roughly 20 years that the school district would receive if there's no children. Correct.
And if there are children, based on the pro forma of the houses being built, they are up to $95 million more in tuition payments.
Right. Okay. And what I'll also say is, if there are no children, that $95 million does go back then into the top dollar amount of how much the TIF is receiving. So that 10% would then obviously shift up because those funds aren't being used on the tuition reimbursement side.
Okay, wonderful. So the project schedule, I know a lot of community members want to know what's happening now. So the developer, since approval in September, has been working on its engineering for the site. So I was told yesterday that like I said, the letter of intent is moving forward with the data center developer, and they're working toward a due diligence period and getting the contract signed. So that is moving forward. The developer is also submitting their subdivision plat for Area 1 in February of 25. So we anticipate that will be coming here in the new year on Area 1, the subdivision north of Hannaford Farms. In 2027, so just a few short years from now, the developer is committed to doing all the obligated redevelopment agreement items within the town center. So the trail system connections from Hannaford Farm through their new subdivision down to the town center. The programmed park, they'll work closely with the park district on that amenity. The splash pad that was obligated, that's coming. The 6 pickleball courts are coming. The stage in the town center green space is coming this is all to be completed by the end of 2027. The bathrooms that they have to put so that there is public bathroom in that area, those are coming. The only amenity that would not be coming as of yet would be the next item on the slide, which is in 2030, is the bridge crossing into the preserved tree growth area. That is a bridge that they're going to put in, projecting right now at 2030, and a trail system will go in and make a loop, kind of like the grass trail. If any of you have walked that grass trail out in the Hannaford woods, within the forest preserve, they have that grass trail out there. It'll do similar to that, but it'll just be in the forest, and it'll have that crushed limestone in there. So it'll be an out and back kind of thing to cross back over the bridge. So that will happen in 2030. The developer is anticipating, especially with the letter of intent with the data centers, that all infrastructure improvements will be made by 2037. That means all parcels, whether they're sold or unsold, will be viable and ready for connection. That's an important thing to note. So we have been projecting with them, or at least reviewing their projections, that the goal of the TIF is to have a mechanism to pay for all the infrastructure and reimburse the developer for the spine infrastructure throughout this development that the village would otherwise provide. So that's what they're doing and getting reimbursed. If they're not reimbursed, that means that the increment hasn't been provided to reimburse them. But also, we wouldn't be accepting infrastructure if that infrastructure wasn't substantially complete. And I just want to highlight the fact that the village is not taking on any debt with this project. This is born from the developer, and the risk really lies within the development and the developer. So if the developer wants to be paid back, the project moves forward and is successful, and that's what keeps them going. Okay. So now we're at the end of the presentation. I appreciate your attention for the last 45 minutes, but let's dive into some of the questions that we did receive. I hope if you did have a question that we were able to answer some of it for you. The first one is, can you give some examples of large TIF districts in surrounding villages that have been successful? Well, we know that there are many TIF districts in surrounding communities. It's hard for us to measure their success. We're not part of their processes or in the inner circle of knowing why something was created or the need in which it was created. So we can't speak to that. We do know that a lot of TIF districts, though, do general obligation bonds to get their TIFs started. We consider ours unique, and everybody that we talk to about that in consult agrees that our TIF here in Sugar Grove is very unique. And I will tell you that past boards have also taken the approach with the existing TIF districts that we've had, that they have only used revenue that the developer has created in a sense, or that was the mindset. And while there has been no true new developments, if you will, to use that in practice, we did have a redevelopment agreement with someone to do that exact thing. So this is, it's hard to really speculate on other communities and what they've done. I don't know if you want to add to that at all.
No, I would say that the village has always had a policy that it's a pay-as-you-go TIF. So the village is not willing to look at a project and upfront most of the cost. Now, markets and the economy always change on that, but in the past, that has not been the policy of the village to front any of those funds. That can always change, but that is not what has been
Yes.
happening in the current 2 TIFs.
Okay. And well, now current,
3.
yeah. Well, one's done.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Using Area 1 in the TIF district as an example, please explain how the school district will be paid within the TIF. I feel like we kind of touched upon that with the example that Matt gave regarding a house in a TIF district. Let's just use for round numbers, if you pay $10,000 in property taxes, the school collects $7,000, and you're not in a TIF district, you're paying $7,000, whether you have 1 child, no child, or 10 children at your home. The example in the TIF district with residential is the TIF is to pay on an annual basis the tuition payment and shore up with the school district on an annual basis for every child. So if you have 3 children residing in your home, the TIF should be paying for those 3 children.
Yeah, up to that.
Up to the 25% of the residential taxes.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the status of the negotiations between Crown and the Hannaford Farm HOA regarding Denny Road access and Wheatfield Avenue berm construction? So I did learn yesterday that when the Hannaford Farm neighborhood was built, that right-of-way was given for at that time for the Denny Road extension. So the right-of-way already exists. They do not need to acquire any property from Hannaford Farm Homeowners Association. As far as the berming is concerned, between, I assume, the Wheatfield berm, I assume is between Crown's subdivision that touches Hannaford Farm. The developer has said that they ideally would love to berm that area and have a very nice landscaped berm as a buffer between the 2 subdivisions. A lot of the berming is really going to be dependent on the grade of the land. So they will evaluate that as the grading is happening. If for whatever reason the grade is not going to be conducive to a berm for water management and stormwater management, they are still landscaping their portion on their side and landscaping, creating a landscaping buffer. When can we expect Starbucks to open? I think we answered that one. We hope everybody comes out in the community for a groundbreaking here in January. I'm sure it will be chilly, but we do expect them to be open for the start of the sometime probably August or early September, so sometime there. When will the pedestrian bridge near the Gilman Trail be open for use? Great question. For those of you that live in close proximity or that are avid users of the trail, you've noticed that there has been some construction in that area this fall. It is ready. They've done all the abutments. It is ready for the bridge. So the bridge has been is in construction, basically prefabricated to be delivered on site as one total bridge. Public Works is telling me, our Public Works Director is telling me we should see it in May-ish. So weather depending, but we will see it in the spring. There an update on plans for development near the Jewel in the downtown area. So this question, I didn't know the exact location, so I'm going to give you 2 answers to this one. The property that is on the north side of Park, I would say north of the McDonald's, that is kind of getting a little bit forestry in there, north of Cilantro, between Park and Capitol. That area, we have had a recent conversation with the property owner on that property, and they are interested in development, whether they do it themselves or opportunities come to them. They are more interested today than they were even last year or the year before. So with some of the growth movement that we're seeing in the village and opportunities that exist today, they are looking forward to something coming forward there. If that's not the area that you were referring to, and you were referring to the Galena Boulevard area and that large parcels of land on the south side of Galena Boulevard, that area is in our comprehensive land plan as residential flex. I believe that that comp plan was just amended in 2023, right? We're in 24, it's crazy. 2023. So that is still anticipated to do something similar to even what Crown has done, which is residential with a commercial component that creates that walkability. So because we don't have a traditional downtown like an Elburn has, we need to create these pockets of opportunity with commercial and community enhancements. And that is really the focus of this board, at least, is that we continue to do that as we move forward with other opportunities. What is the reasoning behind the village's decision to rebrand? It's a great question. We have opportunities that are coming in the sense that we have new signage that would be installed on the off-ramp as you get off on 56 over to Galena Boulevard. We anticipate a Village of Sugar Grove monument there. We also have obligated Crown Community Development on the north side as you enter southbound on 47 to have a village monument sign there. Crown is obligated to a water tower, which would have our brand on it. And we do have the water tower over in the Pressbury area that would be in the next 2.5 years. We have it in there for that time frame, that would have to be repainted. So there's some big projects that we have coming forward. And if there's a time to discuss our brand and what it looks like, this is the time to discuss it and whether we're going to do anything. The village board might decide they don't want to do anything, and that just gives us clear direction to move forward when signs are installed to continue with the monument signs that we have and the brand that we have. It does not mean that we're jumping to replace anything unnecessarily. If there was ever a change to freshen that so it's better for digital, or if we just wanted to streamline it a little bit, community engagement is what was authorized by the village board and directed to staff to do right now. So that's what staff is doing. While we do have money earmarked in our budget, it really has been the direction of the board to staff to work with the community and engage the community on a rebranding effort and see what the community thinks about it in general. We certainly don't want to take on a task like this so large without community input, so it's really important to us. The Crown development created a divide between community members. Why do you think this was needed? And do you have any regrets about bringing this development forward? Well, I certainly regret the fact that there has been such a divide. I feel like there's been a lot of misinformation, and the village board couldn't correct any information or misinformation that was out there until a project was officially approved. So I know that there were a lot of documents, and many of you likely did not read the detail in all of those documents because I know it was cumbersome. But we did have to wait until that project was approved. So my biggest regret is that the community would ever be divided the way it has been, pitted against each other. I think we all have the greater mission here, which is to create a place that we all can say we're happy to live in, create that economic base so that our communities can still, our residents can still thrive and survive in our town and provide economic relief to those homeowners. So that is I guess the biggest regret is that there has been such a divide in our community. The development itself, I feel like we have made leaps and bounds changes from 2019, from an industrial park to a comprehensive plan that includes all aspects of development for our community, and especially the added benefits of community spaces that we truly do not have today. We have a lot of trail systems, and we're doing a good job of making future connections, but we don't really have those places where you can just be for a while. So I'm really looking forward to the community components on that one. What is the reasoning behind the rebrand? We read that one already, sorry. Do you have a plan regarding the increased traffic around construction zone on Route 47? If so, what is it? And are roundabouts an option so we don't end up like Randall Road with a stoplight every 100 feet? It's a valid question. We really are going to have to rely on our engineers on this one. This is not for me as your village president to dictate how the roadway works out. We will do our best to work with those engineers so there isn't traffic congestion. And roundabouts are lovely, and I hope that they are an option for us. I certainly like it when they put some decorative monuments in the center of them. So we will see if that's a viable option, but we will work with the traffic engineers on that. Why does Sugar Grove not have any large public parks? The only thing I can tell you regarding, I don't want to speak for the park district, they do have many parks within our community, and they have done an amazing job at refurbishing the parks that they have and replacing those parks, not refurbishing, but they have done a great job replacing those parks. I can tell you that in the Black Walnut subdivision, there is a community park there, and they did receive an Osland grant to replace that park, and that's roughly $1 million project. So that's an exciting thing coming forward as a large community benefit park. But the Crown Community Development is also going to provide community parks for everyone within its plan. And I would also say, to this end, is that without additional revenue, it's hard for the park district to take on new parks. They're doing a great job of maintaining what they have, but without additional revenue sources, it's hard for them to make improvements and create new, if you will, burdens for themselves. So with the addition of the Crown property annexation into the park district, that will be a greater source of revenue. We're trying to get more revenue through development, through impact fees to the park district. And we work really well with the park district in collaboration because we believe, I can tell you, I believe that our parks are a necessary part of our community and we want them to thrive and have more opportunities for our residents. You've lived here for 25 years. Why does the village primarily have gas stations and fast food restaurants? I will tell you that we had a very recent meeting with, what am I trying to say? Culver's on our business retention visits. We do business retention visits, make sure that our partners in the community, our business partners, are doing well, see if they need anything from us. And part of that visit really came out of, they get a lot of their lunch business from the existing employers in town, but also the nature of the fact that they're located on Route 47. And it is they get college students that come, but just the traffic that is generated there. So that's probably the real cuspid of the answer is just traffic within the area. But for them moving forward, what do they need for continued success? What do all the business partners need for continued success? The driving home message that we hear when we meet with them is they need more customers. So we're working to that end with more residential opportunity and also daytime employment. So we're trying to get some daytime employment in town as well. What was the impact for development interest with the addition of the I-88 interchange at Route 47? Did that addition change the development interest from estate home residential to industrial commercial? Okay, well, that I will tell you, it did change it. By putting those ramps in, but going in both directions, you really opened the land up, and its highest and best use is likely not estate residential. So I know the comp plan has been amended in the past. Certainly from 2014 to 2018, it was amended to have all industrial, except for the small neighborhood near Hannaford Farm. So that was amended because the board at the time likely thought that was the highest and best use for the land. While it might be so on an economic base, it likely isn't so from a living in the community stance. What we've asked of Crown to amend their plan is truly more balanced. We do need an industrial tax base here, and we're missing that opportunity if we don't allow it in. Allowing it in at the tollway is a great opportunity for the village, but it also, like I said, produces that property tax base that the other taxing bodies need as well. I have fears of having a very dense community. Can you explain what your vision is moving forward with future development in the village? I appreciate all the questions. The nature of home building, I assume that's what this is in reference to, is that it's really what the market demands at the time and what is happening in other markets and other communities. We just haven't been open to that in the past. And I would say now that we haven't moved earth in a subdivision in over 20 years. We need to do so. We're seeing that very clearly with the other taxing bodies and referendum questions. While we might have opportunities to have residential growth and their lots are smaller, their opportunity outside of their property should be diverse. And so really what I believe moving forward is community. You can live in your home and somebody will buy and love their home, even if it's a 9,100 square foot lot. But you have amenities around you. You have trail systems and trees and landscapes, and the community is lush. And you have opportunities to take your children to more parks in our community. So the connections that we're trying to make with trail systems, we're still working on a connection point over here at Municipal in 30. That's coming forward as well. So that was something we did get a grant for. We truly want everyone to be connected by trail systems. So the goal of our community and this board is that making those connections and creating opportunity outside your personal space and your property so that residents are gathering together. So that is my vision for our village as we move forward. Do we have any more questions?
That's our last question.
That's our last question. So I appreciate, first of all, our staff and all of you that are listening and anyone who might listen after the fact. We did take about an hour of your evening. Thank you for dialing in and listening. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself at jconan@sugargroveil.gov. Our staff is readily available. You can call or email them, and everybody's email is online, all of our trustees. So thank you for your time this evening. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.